sorry to sound like the voice of travel doom, but wherever you're going, particularly on the train, expect delays and disruption, I'm afraid. And quite a lot of companies are saying you can use your ticket for today later in the week. So with LNER, you can use it any time up until Friday if you're booked to travel today.
So where are the worst affected areas this morning?
Well, as you have been reporting, it's largely the Derbyshire area is seeing really serious problems. There's no trains running on the line between Derby and Sheffield. That's the main line which runs down to London. The line from Derby to Matlock also closed. And then we've also in Scotland got particular problems between Edinburgh and both Aberdeen and Inverness. Lots of residual problems due to the flooding that we've seen on those lines. And then, well, goodness, everywhere in Eastern England seems to be having problems as well. For instance, Norwich is cut off from the main line via Ipswich to London. And there's an awful lot of problems we've had on the East Coast main line. King's Cross Station in London was actually closed for a time yesterday because there were so many crowds, because effectively from Friday morning onwards there's been massive problems on the main line that links Scotland, North East England and Yorkshire with London, and that led to all extra pressure yesterday, and I'm afraid it will be busy today. The problem so far today, if you're heading, there's no LNER trains running north of Edinburgh, but on the rest of the line, lots of staff shortages causing cancellation. Elsewhere, Sheffield to Doncaster, that's closed. Transport for Wales, warning that there's going to be disruption all day. And in particular, the line south from Llandudno into Snowdonia, there's going to be problems there. So I'm sorry to sound like the voice of travel doom, but wherever you're going, particularly on the train, expect delays and disruption, I'm afraid. And quite a lot of companies are saying you can use your ticket for today later in the week. So with LNER, you can use it any time up until Friday if you're booked to travel today.
That's what I wanted to ask you, if this is just a reaction to the weather and therefore when the weather improves, lines will open, or has there been actual structural damage that could mean that some of these lines are impacted for longer?
Really good question, and that remains to be seen. There's serious problems on the line between Newcastle and Morpeth. That's to repair a viaduct that was previously damaged, and there will be odd problems elsewhere on the network. The line from Newcastle to Carlisle was closed yesterday because a tree fell on the line, and I fear you could see more of that. But it's been a miserable weekend for a lot of people. I know people who were trying to travel on Friday who finally made it from Newcastle to London, but on a train that was 6 hours late because of flooding in Grantham. And the line from Leeds to Doncaster was closed yesterday because of flooding, with people being told, you're going to have to go the long way around via York. But of course, the advice was not to travel. That's sort of been eased today, but it's not going to be a great day to travel. And if you can postpone it, that's probably what I would do.
And I guess if people are stranded, I mean, if you have localised train services, you often get a rail replacement bus service. You know, if you're going from London to York, I'm guessing they're not putting those on.
No, and the problem is going to be, particularly going back to kind of Derbyshire, the roads are expected to be experiencing problems, and generally, and also in Scotland, they are simply not putting on rail replacement buses, those great favourites of so many travellers on a Sunday, but they very often are just saying, it's too dangerous to run those, or we can't get the coaches. So that's going to be fairly bleak as well, I'm afraid.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, are ferries impacted at all by this?
Oh yes, I'm afraid so. So sorry, this is one for Callum. It's entirely, almost entirely in Scotland. So if you were trying to, lots of the Northlink ferries between Shetland, Orkney and Aberdeen were cancelled on Friday and Saturday, and indeed the overnight service due out at 5 o'clock yesterday from Aberdeen to Orkney and Shetland. That left at 4 o'clock this morning, so that's going to be not going to be at Lerwick till tea time. Caledonia McBrain, they had lots of problems because of Storm Babet, and now they're having problems as a sort of knock-on effect. There were going to be an extra sailing from Ullapool to Stornoway, really important line connecting mainland Scotland with Lewis, and unfortunately that's been cancelled due to problems with the sewage system. Caledonia McBrain not having a great 2023, and there's also problems to and from Uig.
Can I also ask you, and we were talking a little bit earlier on the programme about the Sunday Times Insight Team investigation on the front page of the paper today, reporting claims by whistleblowers that HS2 is trying to cover up the costs linked to the HS2 project to ensure that politicians keep pumping money into it, public money into it. It's been denied by HS2 Limited. Just wondering your reflections on that.
A staggering story. My jaw was dropping the more I read of this story, which, and of course you've pointed out that HS2 is saying that it's done nothing wrong, but this litany of how can we keep costs down. This, of course, is a problem that a project, not a problem, well, probably both these days, that was actually begun in 2009 by the outgoing Labour government. It's been carried on. Rishi Sunak said that he was going to cut the whole project north of Birmingham in order to save the 30-something billion pounds that it will cost. And the story in the Sunday Times is just full of people trying to say, hang on, we're really worried about this, and then mysteriously losing their jobs. And there's one quote which really stood out for me, which is, we're running out of ways to downplay the costs. And clearly, if there has been misrepresentation going on, this is really serious, and it completely undermines confidence in infrastructure problems. So I'm looking forward to the investigation that is going to be taking place into these, because if public money is just being, if the public and politicians are being misled, then that would be very serious indeed. We shall wait and see what happens. But meanwhile, of course, there's people right across the nation who are furious about HS2 being curtailed, and people right across the Chilterns who are furious about their lovely landscapes being torn up. So it's a dismal chapter for UK infrastructure.
Simon, always good to speak to you. Thank you so much. Simon Calder there, travel correspondent at The Independent.